Hello and welcome. Moss Adams is pleased that you joined us for today's session, Navigate Change in Higher Education with Financial Planning. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Moss Adams webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download the group attendance sheet and a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. Today's session will offer you 1 CPE credit. To receive credit, you must meet the requirements as specified by the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. You must attend at least 50 minutes of the session and respond to at least 75% or 3 of the 4 polling questions, which we'll ask throughout today's presentation. Polling questions will appear within the slide window. To participate in the polls, please click on your answer and be sure to hit the Submit button to record your response. We'll track your progress and alert you when you've earned CPE credit. You can then click the certificate icon in the CPE Progress widget and download your CPE certificate. Don't worry, if you can't download your CPE certificate today, we'll email a copy to you in 2 weeks. If you're attending this webcast in a group, you must complete our group CPE attendance sheet to receive credit. The attendance sheet is available in our slide deck and handouts widget. Please have all group members sign it and send only 1 sheet per group. Also note that CPE credit only can be awarded to participants registered as themselves and isn't available for participants who view the on-demand version. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge our big news that Moss Adams and Baker Tilly are joining forces to create a new firm, one designed to serve the needs of the middle market. It's really exciting, and you can read more about it on our website from the link in the console. And now I would like to introduce today's presenters, Tammy Lohr, Director, and Brian Favorat, Senior Manager here at Moss Adams. Their bios and contact information are located in the console if you would like more information. Now I'll turn it over to Tammy to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Kiva, and thank you everyone for joining today. I'm Tammy Lohr, and I'm a director in our strategy, technology, and operations team. And I lead a lot of our higher education consulting work, in particular around budgeting, operational efficiencies, as well as planning. We know there's a lot going on in higher education right now, and we're really excited to talk to you all today about opportunities to automate and more proactively address this type of uncertainty and change. Brian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, Brian Favorat, Senior Manager here in our Enterprise Systems Consulting Group. I work with our financial automation team and I help clients improve their budgeting and planning processes.
Great, awesome. Well, today we'll be covering 3 main areas to help institutions navigate change. That relates to budget planning, enrollment planning, and then fund balance discussions that may be occurring on your campus. So let's start out by just reflecting on where the industry is at right now and what we know many of you are facing. So we, again, just wanted to start out by exploring some of the most pressing challenges and transformations facing higher education today that contributes to some uncertainty as well as really an evolving risk landscape. One of the most urgent issues is economic pressures for families students and higher education institutions. Even as institutions are freezing tuition or offering discounts, the overall cost of attendance when factoring in fees, housing, and lost income is still pretty substantial, and many families are increasingly questioning the return on investment that they would get from a higher education degree. Is it worth taking on tens of thousands in student debt for a degree? Alongside this, student debt forgiveness or potential caps on that remains up for debate, and that creates both hope and uncertainty for borrowers and students alike. Smaller private colleges as well as regional public universities are particularly vulnerable to these changes. So as enrollment declines, their financial models have become more and more unsustainable, and some have been responding to that by investing in online learning or workforce development, but those pivots do require upfront capital as well as strategic planning in order to be successful. Then adding to this uncertainty is the precarious nature of federal funding and indirect cost recovery right now, which we know a lot of institutions rely on for operational support. And then enrollment challenges are compounding these financial pressures. So the number of traditional college-age students between 18 and 24 is, of course, shrinking. We're all very aware of this. We're all used to, referring to it as the enrollment cliff. But the reality is that it's starting to impact a lot of institutions' bottom lines. And to adapt, many schools are broadening their reach. They're targeting adult learners. They're looking at online course offerings and trying to offer more flexible programs that can align with those workforce demands. Higher education is also increasingly caught in the crosshairs of political debate. So public funding remains pretty inconsistent. It's subject to budget priorities and political leadership, which is shifting. And at the same time, issues like DEI, academic freedom, and free speech have also become really deeply polarized. Those state level battles are influencing what can be taught, how our campus is intended to operate, and how institutions are perceived across the nation. And that unpredictability makes long-term planning more difficult, and it puts you really at the center of some cultural conflict that's going on right now. Public confidence in higher education could be viewed as waning in relation to that. So surveys are showing that people now view college degrees as, potentially overpriced or unnecessary, in particular if there's not a direct correlation between that degree and other well-paying jobs. Simultaneously, the mental health crisis among students is escalating. So they're having anxiety, depression, and burnout. Those syndromes are very common among students, and institutions are struggling to keep up with the need for those support services. So this dual pressure of cultural skepticism and increased student need really are putting in a tough spot. Technology is also fundamentally reshaping higher education. So we've got AI tools that are transforming how are we teaching and learning and managing our operations. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of risks that come with that. So we want to make sure that colleges are staying relevant, they're investing in digital infrastructure, and they're really helping faculty and students develop that AI literacy and those digital skills. We'll be talking about some automation opportunities today as well, so you might have some key takeaways from that. Global instability is also impacting higher education. International education has been a revenue and a diversity driver for a lot of U.S. institutions, but that's becoming harder to maintain. We've got visa restrictions, geopolitical conflicts. We also have increased competition from other countries like Canada, the UK, and Australia. So we're having less of that potential market share given what's going on nationally right now. And that volatility is impacting admissions as well as campus diversity, in particular at research institutions that have historically relied on international students for enrollment and tuition. And the last thing we wanted to cover today was labor market shifts. So employers have been shifting their hiring strategies, and increasingly they're valuing skills over degrees. And that's particularly true in industries that are evolving very quickly, like technology or healthcare or business, where those job requirements are changing pretty rapidly, and that traditional curriculum is a little bit slow to keep up in many cases. So we're seeing a lot of credentialing based on demonstrated skills through certifications or project-based learning. And so all that to say that colleges and universities should be rethinking how are we aligning our academic programs to the labor market needs, and really emphasizing that career readiness across a variety of different disciplines. So this was a doom and gloom slide, but really the future of higher education, it can be seen as uncertain right now, but it's also full of possibility. And what we're finding is that institutions that are able to adapt really quickly by addressing affordability, by looking at student services holistically, and being able to really closely align their programs with the needs of society are going to be best positioned to thrive. So really taking this opportunity to sort of rethink our model and reimagine what we can be in this rapidly changing world will help position your institution for success. So with that, we're going to have our very first polling question. So we want to hear from you. How uncertain are conditions at your institution? And Kiva has a couple of notes for us as well on this. Kiva?
Thank you, Tammy. For the polling questions, they're located right on the slide that we're presenting. If you can't see it, you may need to hit the F5 key to refresh your console. To respond, please click the button next to the answer you choose and make sure you hit the submit button. As a reminder, if you would like to receive CPE for today's webcast, you'll need to respond to at least 3 of the 4 polling questions. Again, please click the button next to the answer you choose and make sure you hit that submit button. Looks like we have about 90% of the answers in. I'll leave this up for another moment here.
Great.
Okay,
I'm very curious to see this
those.
distribution, especially coming off of Wakubo just a couple weeks ago. Let's see. Oh yeah. Only 9% say that conditions are very certain at their institution. There's a lot that are somewhat uncertain and quite a few that are very uncertain. So at least from this poll, you can tell that you're certainly not alone with this. So let's get started talking about budget planning, which is one key strategy to be able to be more nimble and adaptive, given some of the uncertainty that's going on right now. So a little bit more doom and gloom here before we move into some solutions. But really, colleges and universities are navigating an increasingly unstable financial landscape. And that's really forcing some hard choices about what are we going to fund and what are we not going to fund. So starting with state funding, over the last 2 decades, we've seen a consistent decline in state investment in public higher education. In many states, that per student funding still hasn't recovered to pre-2008 levels. And we're seeing proposals across the nation for flat or reduced higher education budgets amidst this economic uncertainty and those shifting priorities that we've already talked about. So for public colleges, this is leaving a growing gap that has to be filled through other mechanisms like tuition increases, private fundraising, or cuts to programs. Compounding this issue is, of course, that the enrollment challenges, seeing a potential decline in enrollment due to those demographic shifts and the questions around the value of a post-secondary degree like we have already talked about. And of course, that lower enrollment directly impacts your revenue from tuition and fees, and that's sort of further squeezing your institution's budget. We're also seeing some interesting things going on with endowments. Endowments have really been considered a financial cushion for a lot of institutions, but even those are showing signs of strain. So after a few years of pretty robust growth, after the post-COVID market rebound, endowments have been facing volatile returns amid ongoing interest rate hikes and that geopolitical instability. So institutions that are really relying heavily on endowment drawdowns to support their scholarships, faculty positions, or capital projects are now starting to recalibrate their spending rules and reevaluating their risk exposure. So the rate of return on many endowments has been failing to meet those spending thresholds. And that's forcing boards to consider reducing their allocations or limiting payouts in order to preserve principal over the long term. That again constrains resources, in particular for mid-sized institutions that don't have a $1 billion endowment. And there's also uncertainty about what will happen with the endowment tax limits in the very near future. Added to this slide here, we have uncertainty in federal funding. Research grants and overhead recovery is another area of uncertainty right now. Agencies like the NIH have traditionally provided pretty robust funding, but political dynamics in Washington are adding a bit of uncertainty here. So institutions that rely on federal grants to fund research or infrastructure or stipends, they're bracing for more competitive funding environments, less available funding, as well as tighter regulations overall. So all of that then translates into impacts on your campus operations. And oftentimes it means really tough budget decisions. So we're seeing universities reduce their course offerings, really streamline those, freeze hiring of faculty, consolidate departments, and make sure that all of their programs are really sort of market-aligned disciplines. We talked a little bit about student support services already. So those mental health resources, career counseling, and retention programs are under a lot of pressure given these budget challenges, even as the demand for those services is really rising right now. There's also, of course, a renewed focus on administrative efficiency. That sometimes will translate into staff layoffs, hiring freezes, or centralization of different services. And then we also are seeing many schools delaying campus improvements or sort of stopping new building projects due to those cost constraints. So what all of this is intended to show you is that relying on this old model of steadily increasing tuition, strong endowments, and generous public funding, it's not the model of today or really of tomorrow. So we need to be proactive, agile, and really transparent in our budgeting process. So given what's going on right now, we have some key dimensions that you could be using to evaluate your current budget model. So what are its strengths, what are its blind spots, and what are its opportunities to have greater resilience? And really, how are we developing our budget model to be more flexible, to be more nimble and agile, given the uncertainties that exist today? So the very first factor is just how responsive is your budget? How well can your budget respond to different changes, particularly in enrollment? Can we quickly adjust our revenue and earn expense forecasts based on the actual headcount or based on student credit hours? Is our tuition revenue forecasting updated dynamically throughout the year? Because when enrollment fluctuates, as it often does, you need a model that can recalibrate very quickly. Those fixed revenue targets can lead to major shortfalls or overextensions if we're not adjusting our assumptions over time. Next, we'll look at decentralization and incentives. So do academic units or departments have control over their budgets? Are they rewarded for growth, efficiency, innovation? That decentralized model for budgeting can help empower departments to really experiment and respond quickly, but only if their incentives are aligned appropriately. You also want your budget process to be very transparent. That's foundational to trust and collaboration. Is it clear and understandable to stakeholders? Are your assumptions, your trade-offs really well documented, and are they well understood across your campus? Scenario planning capacity is something that we'll be talking a lot about today. So are we building a best case, worst case, and most likely case forecast and scenario? And how are we able to pivot when new information like enrollment drops or funding cuts really come up? So scenario planning shouldn't just be a crisis tool. It should really be guiding your long-term strategy and helping to mitigate surprises as they come up. We're also seeing a lot of institutions have renewed discussions around reserves and fund balance, which we'll talk a little bit about today as well. So Reserves are a really key tool for weathering downturns. Do we have clear policies for when we're going to use reserves or those fund balances when we have unexpected shortfalls? And can those funds be used flexibly in response to those changing priorities? Those reserves are just safety nets. They're really strategic assets, but only if our policies allow for their really intentional use over time. And then lastly, of course, we want our mission or our budget to be aligned with our mission or strategic priorities. So is our budget supporting our mission? Are we making strategic investments like innovation funds or targeted growth areas? We want to make sure that we have very flexible, very responsive budgets to allow for that institutional transformation. I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk about automation.
So the common challenge to align with all those challenges that Tammy just expressed there was, how do we manage the underlying data related to those things? So what this slide represents is, for many of our clients, what we typically see, that current state where you're spending a disproportionate amount of your time doing data operation type stuff, preparing information, trying to get information from other people, getting it all centralized, organizing it so that you can do some reporting, and then building some robust controls. A lot of the times those are done in a kind of a manual fashion. And then you're seeing at the top of that current state pyramid there, spending a little bit of your time doing those higher value activities, which are the business insights of where are we going and how are we going to use this information to be directional in how we evaluate our mission. And then that right side there, that desired state, by applying automation in an effective way, you could flip that on its head and spend less of your time going through the data operations, manual controls, manual reports, things of that nature, and spend more of that time actually going through and getting that information out to the people who need to have it to then work through that decision-making process. All right, so on to our next polling question here. So how flexible and adaptable is your current budget model? You say it's highly flexible, somewhat flexible. Oh, I think we actually, highly inflexible. My dyslexia, I almost thought we had two of the same there. So A is highly flexible for those that are making the same mistake that I just did. B is somewhat flexible, and C is highly inflexible. So I'll call that one out for everybody else's benefit there. So if you have a moment, if you could give us your polling answer, that would be fantastic.
I'm curious on this one because it's been a shift over time for a lot of our clients, although I feel like many of them are still stuck in some pretty inflexible models, which is just, it's really not, it hasn't been sustainable for many institutions.
It's painful. And there's a lot of different competing priorities. So we totally understand the plight that everybody's in right now. All right, I think we're arriving at the end here. We're about 91% of the way through. So I think what we'll do is give it another moment here. Everyone wants to get those CPE credits. All right, Tammy, I think I'm going to turn it over here now. There we go. All right, so highly flexible, about 11%, somewhat flexible, that's the majority there, 70%, and highly inflexible, about 18%. So this is a common distribution I think we would see throughout most organizations. Kudos to you all who have highly flexible models, but those that are aspiring to improve those processes, thank you for joining us today, and we'll continue to talk through that.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm just going to introduce an incentive-based budgeting model. This isn't the only budgeting model, but it's one that we're going to sort of do a demonstration for you on how automation can enhance budgeting practices. So this is a model that's designed to better align your resources with your performance, your strategy, and innovation. Unlike traditional budgeting that can be really centralized and reactive, this incentive-based model offers more transparency, flexibility, as well as accountability. So what is an incentive-based budget model? At its core, it's sort of a decentralized approach where revenue is allocated to individual units that generate it. So that includes tuition revenue, which is based on student credit hours or majors, research funding tied to grant activity, and auxiliary revenue from continuing education or other service units. At the same time, units are also responsible for a share of those costs, so things like faculty salaries, facilities, and administrative support. So the idea is essentially that when units are growing enrollment, when they're attracting grants, or when they're operating efficiently, they are benefiting from that directly. So these models are governed by a few sort of core principles. Revenue follows activity. So the more value a unit generates, the more resources it receives. Transparency, budget formulas and decisions are really clearly documented and they're understood across your campus. And then accountability, where units are really empowered, but they also are responsible for financial performance. And then strategic alignment, where central administration can still use targeted funds to be able to support institutional priorities through a couple of different mechanisms. So I'm actually going to have Brian go ahead and start his demonstration of this.
Perfect. All right, bear with me here a moment, everyone. Just going to transition my screen over. Should just take a moment. Tammy, if you could just let me know when if that comes up on your side.
Looks like we can see it.
Oh, perfect. Excellent, excellent. All right. Oh, the joys of doing webinars sometimes. All right, in this segment, we'll continue into the concept of incentive-based budgeting, exploring key features and their implications for financial management within colleges and universities. To illustrate this, I will show you how this modeling works in a Workday adaptive planning environment. So incentive-based budgeting, as Tammy had mentioned, is a financial model that aligns resource allocation with institutional priorities and performance metrics. This approach encourages colleges and universities to be more accountable and strategic in their budgeting processes. By linking funding to specific outcomes, institutions can incentivize behaviors that support their mission. Let's break down some of the key terms associated with the model, which will help us understand how to implement and manage it effectively. So dollar amount to be distributed, here at the top. This figure represents the total pool of funds available for allocation among various colleges and support units within the institution. It is essential to establish this amount early in the budgeting process, as it sets the stage for all subsequent decisions. The dollar amount can be influenced by various factors, including state funding, tuition revenue, grants, and donations. Understanding this figure is crucial because it determines the financial resources available to support academic programs, administrative functions, and strategic initiatives. Next, we have subvention distribution. This is the process by which the total dollar amount is distributed among colleges and support units. Subvention can be thought of as a form of financial support provided to units that may not fully cover their costs through tuition or other revenues. For example, colleges with lower enrollment may receive a higher subvention to help balance their budgets. The distribution process often involves a formula that considers factors like historical funding levels, enrollment trends, and strategic priorities. This ensures that resources are allocated in a way that supports both equity and institutional goals. Now let's discuss provost funds. These are discretionary funds allocated to the provost to support academic initiatives, faculty development, and other strategic priorities. These funds are often focused on areas that align with institutions' mission and goals. For instance, the university aims to enhance research capabilities. The provost may allocate additional funds to research-oriented departments. The flexibility of provost funds allows for quick responses to emerging needs and opportunities, making them a critical component for the budgeting process. University initiatives, which are specific projects or programs that the university prioritizes for funding. These initiatives may include efforts to improve student success and enhance research capabilities or expand community engagement. Funding for these initiatives is typically drawn from the overall budget and can impact how resources are allocated across colleges and support units. The budget allocation between colleges and support units refers to the process of dividing the available funds among the various academic colleges and administrative support units. This allocation is often based on factors such as enrollment, program demand, and the strategic importance to the institution. For example, a college with rapidly growing enrollment may receive a larger share of the budget to accommodate increased demand for courses and faculty. Conversely, support units that provide essential services across the institution may receive a baseline allocation to ensure they can operate effectively. This balance is crucial for maintaining both academic and administrative functions. All right. Now let's discuss the total student FTE. This metric represents the total number of full-time students enrolled at the institution, calculated by converting part-time enrollment into full-time equivalent. FTE is a critical measure for understanding enrollment trends and determining funding allocations, as many financial models are based on student enrollment numbers. For example, if a college sees an increase in FTE, it may justify additional funding to support the growing student population. Tracking FTE is critical in forecasting revenue and plan for the future resource needs. We will continue talking about this in a later demo today as well. Following that, we have a funding per student FTE. This figure indicates the amount of funding allocated to each FTE student. It provides insight into how the resources are distributed across the student population and can help institutions assess whether they are adequately supporting their students. And then finally, we arrive at the college funding distribution. This term refers to the specific allocation of funds to each college based on various metrics, including enrollment, program costs, and performance outcomes. This distribution is essential for ensuring that each college has the resources necessary to fulfill its educational mission and support its students effectively. For instance, colleges that demonstrate strong outcomes in student retention and graduation rates may receive additional funding as a reward for their performance. This approach not only incentivizes colleges to improve, but also aligns funding with institutional goals. All right, so in my model here, basically it works as a calculator. So you can apply each of these numbers, and depending on how the conversations go internally at the organization, you can have real-time discussions based off of assumptions and figures to drive conversation and really evaluate what the goals are. So when assumptions about subvention distribution change, it can lead to significant shifts in funding for various colleges and support units. For example, if the institution decides to increase subvention for colleges with declining enrollment or financial challenges, this may strain the overall budget, requiring adjustments in other areas. If subvention is tied to performance metrics, such as graduation rates or student satisfaction, colleges may need to invest in initiatives to improve these metrics, impacting their financial forecasts and resource allocation strategies. As a result, forecasting must account for these potential shifts in funding and their implication for each unit's operational capacity. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And Tammy, I will pass it back to you.
Great. We're going to move on to our next area that we wanted to share with you today, which is about enrollment planning. So some of the common challenges that we see in enrollment planning are listed here. We understand that enrollment planning is a complex and sort of a high stakes process, and some institutions that we're working with struggle to really do it accurately and efficiently. And so these are some of the more common challenges that we've seen with our clients. So the first is inadequate data. So we see institutions that often rely on outdated data, like last year's enrollment trends rather than real-time insights. So admissions, financial aid, marketing, and academic departments will often also use different data systems and information, which makes it a little bit more difficult to get a total unified picture of what's really going on with our enrollment planning. Additionally, not all schools have the tools or the expertise to forecast enrollment based on behavioral, demographic, or market data. External factors can also be very impactful. So policy changes that have been occurring at the federal and the state level can impact enrollment quite a bit. Immigration rules or FAFSA delays like we saw in 24-25, shifts in state aid policies can cause really big last-minute swings in applicant behavior and their decisions. The economic shifts like recessions, job market booms, or inflation can also suddenly change whether people choose to enroll or defer enrollment for the future. And there's also greater competition from other institutions and non-college options like boot camps that can change pricing or offerings, which can also sort of draw students away. So there's a lot going on here. And then, of course, there's just fewer students out there to recruit, which makes it harder to meet those enrollment goals and ultimately impacts planning at a lot of institutions. And then finally, financial aid strategies can impact enrollment planning. So students are highly responsive to cost and aid packages, but trying to predict that sweet spot where aid is driving enrollment without underspending or undercutting net tuition revenue too much is a little bit of a balancing act. And we often see institutions struggle to balance their mission-driven goals with that financial sustainability, and how are they actually distributing financial aid and driving enrollment through those strategies as well. So to address those complex challenges in enrollment planning, these are some of the best practices that we'd like to talk to you all about today, having a strategic, data-informed, and cross-functional approach to this work. So at the top, you see that colleges should be adopting predictive analytics and data integration. Brian's going to talk about that and do a demonstration for us. We're helping our clients use real-time data to track student behavior across different channels like website visits, email opens, application starts, to really inform outreach and forecasting. You can also use machine learning tools to estimate yield, melt, and likelihood to enroll based on some historical and new behavioral data. We also need to integrate admissions, financial aid, marketing, and student success data into some type of a unified system or dashboard. So as you are getting into your data, building multiple forecasts that use, again, the best case, worst case, and most likely models to help prepare your institution for any surprises. You can also monitor yield and melt indicators in real time based on housing deposits, FAFSA submissions, and orientation signups. The next area is just to work with your enrollment services. And really, enrollment should be about cross-functional, cross-departmental collaboration across academics, finance, and housing, IT, and student services. So everyone should see enrollment as an institutional priority. This isn't just an admissions task. So techniques here include segmentation and augmentation to really target and follow up with specific students. Look at where are we recruiting from? How do we build our transfer pipelines? Do we have a really strong CRM system to help streamline our outreach, our applications, and our yield tracking? And again, it's really important that everyone is involved in getting students to the institution. It's not just on your admissions folks. And then finally, financial aid. We talked a little bit about that on the prior slide. So essentially using tools to test your different aid strategies so that you're optimizing your packaging for your yield and your net revenue. So we're blending that need-based and merit aid carefully to be able to support access and enrollment goals.
So high-performing organizations understand that being data-driven is essential for making informed decisions and achieving strategic goals. First, we have the plan. This involves setting clear objectives and utilizing data to inform our planning processes. By analyzing historical trends and current data, we can create more accurate forecasts and strategic plans that align with our institutional goals. This proactive approach allows us to anticipate challenges and seize opportunities. Next is perform. Once we have our plans in place, we need to execute them effectively. This means leveraging data to monitor performance against our objectives by establishing key performance indicators and regularly reviewing our progress. We can make timely adjustments to ensure that we stay on track. The third component is people. A data-driven culture requires that we empower our staff and stakeholders with the right tools and training. By fostering a culture of data literacy, we enable everyone in the organization to make informed decisions based on data insights. Engaging our people in this way not only enhances accountability, but it also drives collaboration across departments. Finally, we have communicate. Effective communication is vital for ensuring that data insights are shared across the organization. By creating transparent channels for sharing information, we can enhance collaboration, align efforts, and foster a shared understanding of our goals. Regular updates and reports can help everyone be informed and engaged on strategic initiatives. Let's explore the concept of rolling forecasts and their value in financial planning for higher education institutions. On this slide, we have two graphs, one representing traditional annual planning and the other illustrating a rolling forecast. Let's look at the annual planning graph. This model typically culminates at the end of the budgeting year. While it provides a snapshot of our financial expectation at a specific point in time, it can quickly become outdated as circumstances change. The static approach often limits our ability to respond to new information, unexpected challenges, or emerging opportunities. In contrast, the rolling forecast graph demonstrates a more dynamic approach. Here you can see how the forecast continues to evolve over time, incorporating actual performance data as it becomes available. The waterfall effect illustrates how real-time data feeds into our projections, allowing us to adjust our forecast based on the most current information. By continuously integrating actual performance data and adjusting our projections, we can navigate change more effectively and position our institutions for long-term success. All right, third polling question here. So how challenging would you rate enrollment planning processes at your institution? Very challenging, somewhat challenging, easy. I'm super interested to see who knocks the easy button. But this is a very hot topic, and I'm sure you have some thoughts on that, Tammy.
I was just going to say that I doubt many institutions have that easy button from the old Staples commercial around. And we got, during Brian's demo, we got just a few comments in the chat around wanting the screen share to be a bit bigger. So just wanted to take this opportunity to remind everyone that you can adjust the size of the media player widget so that the screen share can be a little bit bigger, because right after this polling question, we'll have another demonstration as well. So we want to make sure you can see all the cool stuff that is going on with the automation. Just a couple more seconds. I think we're just about there, yeah.
91%. All right, I think it's end. We'll switch it over here. All right, so very challenging, about 1/4. 70% said somewhat challenging, about 6% said easy. So good for the 6%. Kudos to you guys.
Yeah. They should do a webcast on what makes it so easy. That's awesome.
Exactly. I'm very curious. Yeah, but very challenging and somewhat challenging. And I'm sure the challenge there can manifest itself in lots of different ways, right? There's data-related issues, process-related issues, the involvement of different people in the organization, different ideologies, methods for how that data might come together. So yeah, we're going to continue to talk about that here next. All right, so I'm going to switch over to my demo here again. And again, appreciate everybody's patience as I switch over. It always takes a moment here. A very anticlimactic sort of pause. But Tammy, if you could just let me know when that comes back up again for everybody. And
You're live.
Okay, perfect. I did try to expand this one a little bit more, so maybe that people can see that a little bit easier. I hope that's the case on your side. All right. So as we all know, enrollment is the lifeblood of higher education institutions. It directly influences revenue, resource allocation, and ultimately the ability to fulfill our mission of providing quality education. In today's rapidly changing landscape, effective enrollment planning is more critical than ever. By forecasting enrollment accurately, we can make informed decisions that align our financial strategies with institutional goals. This proactive approach allows us to anticipate challenges, optimize resource allocation, and enhance student success. So let's break down the components of enrollment planning. So forecasting headcounts, understanding how to project headcounts from fall to spring semesters or summer semesters and beyond is essential. By analyzing historical data, we can identify trends and patterns that inform our projections. Managing transfers and attrition. It's crucial to account for transfers and attrition rates in our models. By implementing formulaic approaches to manage attrition, we can create more accurate forecasts and develop strategies to retain students. And then ending headcounts. Ultimately, our goal is to determine the accurate ending headcount that reflects our institution's capacity and strategic objectives. Now let's dive into a demonstration of how we can utilize Workday Adaptive Planning to model enrollment effectively. Here you'll see a simplified enrollment model that takes into account previous semester headcounts, transfers and attrition. As we make as we adjust our assumptions, like improving retention strategies, we can see how these changes impact our ending headcount. So in my little model here, I have the School of Business. Perhaps there's a variety of different schools. They might all have their own supported enrollment models. And then at the top here, we have some global assumptions where perhaps we want to manage attrition differently. I've seen it done in a variety of different ways, but depending on how granular the organization wants to get or deliberate they want to get, we can make some different assumptions regarding attrition between different cohorts, timing of the year, and all the related factors there. So this dynamic model not only allows you to visualize potential outcomes, but also empowers us to test various scenarios and make data-driven decisions. All right, this dashboard provides a snapshot of our enrollment health, showcasing metrics such as total headcount, retention rates, and projected revenue. By having this information at our fingertips, we can quickly assess our progress and make necessary adjustments to our strategy. So why is enrollment planning so valuable for higher education institutions? Accurate enrollment forecasts lead to better financial planning, ensuring we allocate resources effectively and maintain financial stability. With reliable data, we can make informed decisions regarding program offerings, staffing, and facilities, aligning our resources with student needs. All right. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Tammy.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna round out today's presentation by talking about fund balance. So many of our clients who are facing budget deficits or are struggling to have this conversation around fund balance. So oftentimes we'll find that a CFO says, we have a budget deficit of X dollars, but then people go and look at the financial statements and they're like, you look great. What are we talking about? So based on how often this has been coming up, we thought we would round out this session today by sharing some of the misnomers that we see and look for ways to help create more consistent understanding across your campus around your really true financial position, particularly with respect to fund balance and cash. So hopefully we've got a few slides here that may resonate with some of you who are on today. So this first one, the college has a large fund balance, so we have to be financially healthy. Well, not necessarily, right? A large restricted or plant fund balance doesn't necessarily mean that we have money for salaries, student services, or other urgent needs. And often the majority of funds are earmarked and they're not necessarily available for operational use. Fund balance is cash on hand. No, it's not. These are accounting representations. This is not liquid cash. Some of those fund balances are tied up in non-cash assets like buildings or investments. But how do you communicate that to your campus? Oh, you can just use the surplus from last year to fix this year's shortfall. Well, not always. We have restrictions and we have designated funds that could prevent reallocating those funds across different categories or fiscal years. And then finally, a balanced budget means that we have really strong financial performance. Well, a budget can be balanced. It can also mask deferred maintenance, underinvestment in faculty, or a reliance on unsustainable revenue sources or even reserves. So we wanted to take an opportunity to show you what we're working on with clients, to really analyze their fund balance trends over time, look at sustainability, and help educate those that aren't financial leaders across our campus on what do different fund balances really mean. But before we do that, we have our fourth and our final polling question. So we want to hear from you. Which of these do you hear at your institution? We have a big fund balance. What's the big deal? Fund balances are cash on hand. We can just use those. Let's just use last year's money to pay for the balance for this year. Or we have a balanced budget. We're fine. We're in good shape. Or E, all of the above. I guess I could have had an F for none of the above. And then I would have followed up with those folks to figure out exactly how they're managing that. Because most of our clients, they deal with at least one of these.
Oh, yeah.
So just a reminder to get in your last polling question, and then Brian will have another demo on this as well.
And we'll talk a little bit about the visibility of those fund balances. That tends to be a challenge sometimes.
Yep, it can be. Misconceptions around it. All right, we've got about 80% of folks. So again, just a reminder to get your response in for this question so you can get your CPE for spending some time with us today.
%. Come on, team. We can do it. Almost there.
Just a couple more seconds. That way we make sure that there's enough time for Brian to do his last demonstration. All right. I'm going to move us forward. Going once. Going twice. Done. All right. All of the above. A third of you said all of the above. And then it looks like we have a balanced budget, so we must be in good shape. Comes in second. So yeah, some common misconceptions and things that certainly are distributed across different institutions depending on what the conversations are looking like. All right, Brian, show us what you got.
I'll do my best. All right, we're going to do this one more time here. Going to make that transition. It's going to be seamless. Tammy, let me just know when that comes up again on your side.
I will. You're good. Right. You're live.
All right, we're live. Here we go. All right. So for our last quick demonstration here, we'll focus on the challenges related to fund balance planning and the management for universities and colleges. Effective fund balance management is crucial for maintaining financial health and ensuring that institutions can meet their commitments to students, faculty, and the broader community. Before we dive into the challenges, let's just briefly define what we mean by fund balance. The fund balance represents the difference between an institution's assets and liabilities at a given point in time. It serves as a financial cushion, allowing colleges and universities to manage cash flow, invest in strategic initiatives, and respond to unforeseen circumstances. However, managing this fund balance effectively presents several challenges. One of the primary challenges in fund balance planning is revenue uncertainty. Institutions often rely on various revenue sources, including state appropriations, tuition, grants, and donations. Fluctuations in these revenue streams can create significant challenges. Another significant challenge is managing expenditure pressures. As costs continue to rise, institutions must balance their budgets while maintaining quality programs and services. Expenses related to faculty salaries, benefits, utilities, and maintenance are often on the rise. Institutions must carefully monitor these costs to avoid eroding their fund balances. Colleges and universities are increasing investing in initiatives to enhance student success, improve facilities, and expand technology. While these investments are essential, they can strain fund balances if not carefully planned and executed. Effective fund balance management requires institutions to prioritize expenditures and ensure that spending aligns with strategic goals while maintaining adequate reserves. Compliance and reporting requirements. Compliance and reporting requirements also pose challenges for fund balance management. Institutions must adhere to various regulations and standards, which can complicate financial planning. Changes in accounting standards can impact how fund balances are reported and managed. Institutions must stay informed about these changes to ensure compliance and accurate reporting. Stakeholders expect transparency in financial management. Institutions must provide clear and accurate reports on fund balances, which can be challenging to navigate, especially during times of financial uncertainty. To address these challenges, institutions should invest in training and resources to ensure compliance with reporting requirements and maintain transparency with stakeholders. The strategic use of fund balances is another area of concern. While having a healthy fund balance is essential, institutions must also consider how to use these funds effectively. Institutions face the challenge of balancing the need to maintain reserves for emergencies while also investing in growth opportunities. Excessive reserves may indicate underutilization of resources, while insufficient reserves can jeopardize financial stability. Institutions must develop long-term strategies for fund balance management that align with their mission and goals. This requires careful consideration of how fund balances can support strategic initiatives without compromising financial health. Effective planning and communication are key to ensuring that fund balances are used strategically to support the institution's mission. And finally, external economic factors can significantly impact fund balance planning and management. Recessions or economic slowdowns can lead to decreased state funding, lower enrollment, and reduced donations, all of which strain fund balances. Shifts in demographics, such as declining number of high school student graduates in certain regions, can affect enrollment and consequently tuition revenue. Institutions must be proactive in adapting to these changes to maintain financial stability. To navigate these external challenges, institutions should engage in scenario planning and develop flexible financial strategies that can adapt to changing economic conditions. All right. So with that, I will transition here. Thank you, everybody, for joining today, and I will pass it over to Kiva.
Thank you both for a great presentation today. To our audience, if you have any further questions or comments, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to continue the conversation. You can drop a note in the Q&A window or reach out to the presenters directly. Their contact information is in the console as well as in the slide deck, which you can download now from the handouts window. If you have met all CPE requirements, your certificate is now available in the CPE progress window. A copy will be also emailed to you within the next 2 weeks. Finally, here's a link to the survey for today's presentation. Your feedback is always appreciated. Again, thank you for joining us and take care, everyone.